I just got back from China and I'm ready to tackle Season 6, but I'm not the only thing that's back. STORMCLAW is back in a big way. If you haven't seen the patch notes already, STORMCLAW got multiple buffs. We're also at a point with STORMCLAW where it casually gets max critical strike chance, max attack speed cap 1 and cap 2. Now before we get into this build, let me show you what I put together. So I created this entire spreadsheet just so that I could compare builds to each other for Season 6. And I'm going to be doing this for Druid and Spiritborn and doing multiple builds for both. In fact, I'll probably cover every build available for both of them. Take these numbers with a grain of salt because this is my own math. I'm not a math expert, and I didn't calculate things like attack speed into this. But as you can see here, I came out with 234 mil for just the Storm Strike portion of Stormclaw, and another 41 mil for the Claw portion. That doesn't include things like Overload, Bad Omen, or the damage from Hurricane. Just for comparison, when Pulverized doesn't get an overpower, it's 428 mil by these calculations. But keep in mind that this is my Season 6 Pulverize, which doesn't build very heavily into overpower, believe it or not. So considering the fast attack speed, it should actually be relatively viable. But either way, if you like that bruiser playstyle with fast attack speed, life sustain, and a whole lot of movement speed, this is a great build for you. Now I'm going to do things a little bit different this season. I'm not going to read off every single thing in the build. I'm going to focus on talking about the most important aspects of the build, the gameplay loops, and certain specific information for the build. If you want to see all of the little details, make sure you click on the link under my stream and go to my Mobalytics page. So let's talk about why Stormclaw is stronger this season. First off, with the Great Staff of the Crone, we're getting the chance for Storm Strike to hit twice. This is huge because this is just a straight damage increase. They also upped the multiplier for Storm Strike at the bottom. We've also got Wildheart Hunger that we can use, and we get a lot of attack speed and we get a lot of damage from this. But it's not like before where you had to stay in each form for a couple of seconds. Now you just need to shapeshift back and forth and not stay in human form for 3 seconds or longer, which we can easily do. They also added Stone Burst this season, and Stone Burst has an interesting place as a utility skill. So first off, casting Stone Burst is going to spend Spirit, and that's going to give us the bonuses from Starless Skies, as well as Ancestral Guidance on the Paragon boards. In addition to that, the skill itself gives us extra damage from this aspect, and that's a fat 50% damage multiplier. We also get 30% attack speed. To be honest, I don't actually know which attack speed cap this goes into, but either way, we'll use it to cap out whatever's left over from what we don't have. If you scroll down to the bottom, you can see my attack speed breakdown, and you can see that we're naturally getting 20% from Enhanced Claw, we're getting a bunch from Ring of Starless Skies, we're getting 20% from Moonrise, and then there's gear affixes. So if Stone Burst goes into the first category, we just put less on our gear. And if it goes into the second category, well, we're basically maxing out from just these two, and those are naturally in the build, but it'll get us to 100%. So we'll see where it ends up going. Now, one of the caveats for this build is we aren't sure yet if Adaptability is going to work for Storm Strike. Historically, it hasn't, but I'm really hoping that they fix this when they decided to do the Great Staff of the Crone buff. If Adaptability doesn't work, we can easily move Moonrise over to our Amulet, shift Shattered Defenses over to our Gloves, and then put Unsatiated here. Alternatively, we could go Fists of Fate on our Gloves as long as the interaction's working correctly, and that would allow us to not have to use Unsatiated. Now, if you're not familiar with this build, Tempest Roar is an important component to the build because this is going to make our Storm Strike into a werewolf skill. That's going to allow us to do a couple of different things. For one, it's going to mean that we can automatically poison enemies with Toxic Claws. We could kind of do that with Claw, but Storm Strike is more reliable because it can chain to multiple enemies that are further away. Just to note here, there's not a point in Toxic Claws, and possibly in some of the other passives, and that's because we're getting extra passive points from the Shroud of False Death. So the basic gameplay loop of this build is going to be running towards enemies, hitting them with Stone Burst, and you actually want to spam this until you run out of Spirit. That's going to activate your Starless Skies, your Shattered Defenses, and your Ancestral Guidance, not to mention that 30% attack speed. Keep in mind that you need to hit enemies once at least every 5 seconds to keep up your Shattered Defenses, but you're going to want to do that for your Ring of Starless Skies and your Ancestral anyways. Now, your main way to deal damage is to spam Claw constantly. When you use Claw, you're automatically casting Storm Strike, so you're hitting with both basic skills, and you're doing most of your damage with the Storm Strike, but you do some damage with the Claw. You're going to want to use Debilitating Roar whenever it's off cooldown. This is going to reduce enemy damage and increase your damage. Cyclone Armor is passively protecting you, but it only works for non-physical damage. If you decide you want any other skill, this is the one to replace on the bar. Hurricane is going to protect you from enemies by reducing their damage, and it's also going to give you access to Storm Shifter's aspect, and this is going to give us +5 to our Claw and our Storm Strike. Finally, your ultimate is Petrify, and this increases your critical strike damage against enemies, and it also stuns enemies, so don't be afraid to use this whenever you want. For the Spirit Boons, the only thing I would consider possibly changing is Overload. This is going to add some AoE damage, and they just buffed this to be 100% damage, which is a 5 times multiplier from what it was before. So try it out, and if you don't feel like you need the AoE, then feel free to go for something else. You could definitely go for the crit chance, or you could go for the maximum life. If you're looking at the guide using the link below this video, you're going to want to click on Gear Stats in order to see the detailed breakdown of all the stats. Here I just want to emphasize a few things that are very important. So Envenom is extremely important. This is going to be your main source of damage from your gear. You're going to want to make sure you balance your critical strike chance and your attack speed, because technically you can go over the cap on both of these by accident, so make sure you don't get too many bonuses, otherwise you're going to have wasted stats. And another one of the most important things to increase your damage is make sure you maximize your chance for Storm Strike to hit twice. You're going to want every bonus in this. For your runes, you have a lot of wiggle room. So I went with the Warcry here because it's a 15% damage multiplier with a little bit of movement speed, and there aren't many damage multipliers here. However, there's a lot of options you could go with, such as Vortex, critical strike chance early on, Bulwark, which I have recommended here, or you could even go with more casts of Petrify to keep your uptime as high as possible. Now you're always going to want your runes to go in your weapon if you can, because weapons are just additive damage, and we'd much rather have willpower on our armor. And for our resists, we're getting lightning resistance from our helmet, cold resistance from our boots, and poison resistance from our paragon boards. So you only need 1 ruby gem and 1 amethyst gem, which frees up 1 slot for a skull. This should make it fairly easy to hit your resistances and your armor. Now if you get curious why there's only 1 point in Claw, it's because Claw doesn't do nearly as much damage as Storm Strike in this build. However, if your only priority is damage, you can pull out defensive passives wherever they are and focus on damage with this. Or if you put more points in Debilitating Roar, it's going to lower the cooldown and give you more uptime on that damage multiplier, which I actually think is probably better than points in Claw. Another one I'd recommend is Catastrophe. I think we can actually use this fairly often, especially if you decide to go with a Petrify as your rune word. You can keep this up almost all the time. Now this is a fully stacked Paragon board, but I'm actually making 2 variations of the build. One is going to be this one, which is more of the advanced setup, and then I'm going to make the easy online setup, which is going to have the basics and try and get you going as quickly as possible. Make sure you're referencing this one though if you plan to go late game, because you don't want to be in a spot where you choose the wrong stats because you looked at the wrong build. As you can see, I only left 24 points. I basically took everything that looked nice. And I'm going to be leaving the 24 points because if you get to that point, you're probably somebody who knows a little bit about what they're doing, and you can look around and choose what is best for you. If you really don't know what to choose, just go for max life. It's the easiest option. For the Mercenaries, I'm going to need to get my hands on them and see how I feel. But early game, you can definitely go for attack speed with Variana. And once you've maxed out your attack speed, you're probably going to want some damage or damage reduction from probably Rahir or Aldkin. If you're just looking to get started and you don't want to have to worry about mythic uniques, click on this tab here. This is the easy online setup. We've got Mad Wolf's Glee, Unsatiated, and I stripped the Paragon board down so that you don't have a bunch of stuff that's not as important. That will allow you to get to more power faster. But that's it for now. I hope you guys like this build. I'm really excited that Stormclaw is doing better this season, and I can't wait to play it and watch you guys play it as well. If you like this type of content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys in my next video. Daddy Druid out. But you do some damage with the claw. Doo-doo.